One of the problems with recruiting for investment banking is not the knowledge or skills you acquire, but the access to talk with real investment bankers to put your best foot forward. Our sponsor, WSO Academy, can provide those connections with 60 head mentors who are finance professionals at top firms like Goldman, Centerview, and JP Morgan. Imagine being able to get on the phone within 24 hours with one of the Academy's 1,300 mentors right before a critical interview. Get on the waitlist for WSO Academy today by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting wallstreetoasis.com/academy. All right. Welcome to Investment Banking Insights. This is the only show dedicated to helping you learn both the technical and non-technical aspects of the investment banking process. Hi, my name is Alex Mason, and I am your host. And today I want to talk to you about this concept of working capital. We're talking about some accounting principles, trying to understand the basic definitions of things and how they fit within the context of the broader world of finance so that you and I, as investment bankers, can understand how to apply them. So let's go ahead and talk about what working capital is and why it matters. So we're going to go ahead now to the whiteboard. And essentially, working capital, the basic definition is this. And I'm going to go ahead and call this operating working capital. And so what this is equal to is your current assets minus cash. And we can kind of think of this as one part of the equation. And then we're going to subtract current liabilities minus debt. Okay, and so let's talk about each component of what's going on here. So remember, your current assets are things that can be converted into cash within the next 12 months. There's a reasonable expectation that you're going to convert these things into cash. So these are things like your accounts payable or your inventory, for example. And then, of course, cash is just cash. Now, current liabilities, these are obligations that the company is going to owe within the next 12 months. So this is going to be something like accounts payable, for example. And then the thing is, with debt, we're thinking about like short-term debt that the company may owe in the near term. Like that's going to be a current liability too. So these are some things that we want to consider. Now, why are we doing this? Why are we subtracting out cash? Why are we subtracting out debt? Well, what we want to do with this number of operating working capital is we want to understand how well the business is able to manage its current net worth, I guess you could say, or its current equity in the short term in order to run its operations. So you can imagine a situation where the company has a ton of current liabilities and not that many current assets. Well, that may lead you to believe, well, how are they going to pay their bills? Are they actually going to be able to pay their bills on time if they have $500 million due in the next 12 months, but they only have $100 million on the books in terms of assets today? So that can lead to some skepticism in terms of financial insolvency. Now, the reason we're subtracting cash and debt out of these two parts of the equation is because we want to understand what I guess you could say, the equity position of the company is after you strip out those things. So it's really a measure of liquidity. Now, operating working capital, if it's negative, it's kind of like the concept of shareholders' equity that we were recently talking about in the last episode. If it's negative, it might be a bad sign. It might mean the company can't necessarily pay its bills. but it's not always a bad thing. And one example of why this isn't always a bad thing is based on the business model. So let's say that the business is a subscription business model. Let's say it's something like Spotify, the music service. So Spotify, you pay a subscription fee to the service, and then you receive the service later. So the company has something called deferred revenue. Deferred revenue. And what this means is that the company collects cash up front, but then recognizes the revenue at a later date. And that's because, according to accounting rules, you only recognize revenue once a good or service is actually rendered or when it's actually earned by the company. So that could lead to a situation where there's a lot of current liabilities, but maybe not necessarily a lot of current assets, because the company hasn't necessarily recognized revenue yet. And so even though it's collected the cash, if you subtract that out of current assets, you might be in a situation where operating working capital could be very low or even potentially negative. So that's one example of how operating working capital might not necessarily be a bad thing if it's low or negative, but in a conventional business situation or in a conventional sense, it can be a warning sign that a company is headed for insolvency or has some kind of liquidity issues. So that's the basic principle of what working capital is. It's the amount of money that's within the business that is being used to actually run operations on a day-to-day basis. So it's important to look at this number and understand what it means. Okay. So that's what we got here today on Investment Banking Insights. My name is Alex Mason, your host, ready to, just drop some knowledge here. Hope you're enjoying it. Hope you're loving it. And I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day. Bye.